Ethan stood on the edge of the rocky cliff, staring out at the strange landscape that lay before him. The alien planet he was exploring was nothing like Earth. The sky was a dull purple, with 2 moons hanging low. Strange spiky plants grew. From the ground, their surfaces glimmering in the soft light of the moons. Everything seemed quiet, almost too quiet. He had been sent on this mission alone. The objective was simple: gather resources and report back. But something about this planet felt off. Ethan had heard rumor stories of hostile alien species, warriors that would destroy anything in their path. Humans had warned him to be careful, but he had shrugged it off. What could go wrong? After all, he was a trained soldier, as he continued his trek. Ethan's boot crunched against the soft, uneven terrain. The ground seemed unstable, shifting beneath his feet with every step. He paused for a moment, scanning the horizon. The wind began to pick up, blowing dust and small rocks into the air. It was as if the planet itself was warning him. But Ethan was determined to finish his mission. He wasn't afraid. Then, from behind a large boulder, he heard it. A soft, almost imperceptible sound like the rustling of leaves. Ethan's hand instinctively went to the gun, holstered at his side. His heart rate picked up, and he cautiously approached the boulder, his eyes scanning the surroundings. There was nothing there, nothing except the wind and the rocks. He took another step, but this time, the sound came again. It was louder now, almost as if someone or something was moving. Ethan crouched behind the boulder, waiting. He had to be smart about this. The last thing he wanted was to be caught off guard. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was an alien, tall and muscular, dressed in battle armor that gleamed in the moonlight. The warrior's skin was a pale gray, with markings that covered their arms and face. Their eyes, large and almond-shaped, were a glowing blue. The creature was no more than 10 feet away from him, but it hadn't noticed him yet. Ethan held his breath, his body frozen in place. The alien moved with silent grace, as if it had been walking for miles without making a sound. Ethan's mind raced. Was this one of the hostile aliens they had warned him about? Should he attack now, before it had the chance to strike first? The tension in the air was thick, almost suffocating. But then, to his surprise, the alien stopped. It turned its head slowly, looking directly at Ethan. Its expression was unreadable. But there was something in its eyes, a sense of vulnerability, maybe fear. The alien took a step forward, lowering its weapon. Ethan's grip tightened around the handle of his gun, but the alien didn't attack. Instead, it dropped to its knees, bowing its head in what appeared to be a sign of surrender. Ethan blinked, unsure of what he was seeing. This wasn't how he expected an alien warrior to behave. "Don't kill me, human. ... The alien's voice was rough, and it seemed to struggle to speak. "I'll warm your bed," it added, looking up at him with desperate eyes. Ethan's mind couldn't process the words at first. This alien, a fierce warrior in battle armor, was begging for mercy. The idea that it might be pleading for its life was completely unexpected. Ethan had always thought of aliens as cold, calculating creatures, ready to kill anyone who crossed their path. But this was something else entirely. For a moment, Ethan just stood there, his mind spinning. What was going on? He'd been trained to fight, to kill if necessary. He wasn't prepared for this kind of situation, one where the enemy seemed to be asking for help. The words, "I'll warm your bed," echoed in his mind. What did it even mean? Was this some kind of trick? But the more Ethan looked at the alien, the more he realized something strange. There was no deception in its eyes. It wasn't trying to gain an advantage. It was simply scared, vulnerable, and completely at his mercy. His hand relaxed slightly on the gun. He had always expected to be the one in control, the one making the decisions, the one with the power. But now, in this moment, the alien was the one who needed him. Ethan felt a strange pull of sympathy, though he didn't know why. It wasn't something he had ever felt before. The alien didn't move. It stayed kneeling, its head still bowed, waiting for Ethan's response. The wind blew gently, rustling the leaves nearby, but there was an uncomfortable stillness in the air between them. Ethan's heart was racing and his mind was filled with questions. What did the alien want from him? What was its true purpose? For a moment, Ethan considered pulling the trigger. It would be easy, but something stopped him. Something in the alien's pleading gaze. He knew he couldn't kill it. Not yet. Get up, Ethan said, his voice low and steady. Tell me why I shouldn't kill you. The alien looked up, its glowing blue eyes locking with Ethan's. It didn't speak at first, as if it were trying to gather the right words. Then, with a voice that seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 battles, it said, I am not your enemy, human, but the ones who sent me. They will destroy your world if you do not stop them. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. The alien wasn't just pleading for its life. It was warning him of something much bigger, something far more dangerous. For the first time since arriving on this planet, Ethan felt a cold chill run down his spine. Something wasn't right, and he was about to find out just how deep the danger ran. The silence between Ethan and the alien felt unbearable. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Ethan's mind was racing, trying to process the alien's words. I am not your enemy, human, but the ones who sent me. They will destroy your world if you do not stop them. Ethan's fingers tightened around the gun once more, though his hand shook slightly. Could he trust the creature kneeling before him? Could he really believe that this alien, the very embodiment of humanity's greatest fear, was asking for his help? Circathon had learned her name only moments ago, shifted uncomfortably on the ground. Her breathing labored from the wounds she had taken. The alien warrior wasn't just physically hurt. There was something deeper, something more desperate. In her eyes, it wasn't the look of a conqueror, but a survivor. And survivors always had a story to tell. Why should I trust you? Ethan finally asked, his voice hoarse with suspicion, stepped back, keeping a firm hold on his gun. Even though he wasn't sure what to believe, one thing was clear. The situation had taken a dangerous turn. He wasn't just dealing with a lone enemy soldier anymore. This was something bigger. His eyes flickered with frustration, then a tinge of sadness. You don't have to trust me, human. I'm just asking for a chance to stop what's coming. Her voice cracked slightly and she lowered her gaze, as if the weight of her words were too much to bear. Ethan's heart raced, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He could walk away, leave her to die, but the thought gnawed at him. He wasn't sure why, but something about Circa's plea stirred a feeling in him that he had long buried compassion. Maybe it was her vulnerability, or maybe it was the way her eyes seemed to echo a kind of lost hope. Regardless, he couldn't just leave her there. But the idea of trusting her, trusting an alien who had been sent to invade his world, was unfathomable. What do you mean by stop them? Ethan asked, narrowing his eyes. He was on edge now, but a part of him was desperate for answers. Who are these people you speak of? Circa's gaze hardened, and she looked away, her voice turning low, almost as if afraid someone might hear. The faction that controls my people, they believe humanity is a threat to the universe. They want to wipe you out before you even know what's coming. They'll use everything they've got, everything they've been building for centuries to make sure your species never leaves Earth. They don't care about peace or alliances. They want conquest. Ethan could feel his breath catch. The word struck him harder than he expected. Wipe humanity out? The thought was too horrible to even imagine. What kind of power did these aliens hold? More importantly, what was his role in all of this? Why come to me? Ethan asked, trying to regain control of the conversation. Why not just fight them yourself? Circa's expression darkened, her eyes clouded with something that looked like regret. I was part of that faction, until I saw the truth. I was their soldier, their weapon. I didn't know what I was fighting for, not until I realized ... They're not saving the universe. They're destroying it. All the species they've wiped out my people's future, and the ones who came before us, they've all fallen victim to their greed. I defected. I ran. But they'll come for me. And when they do, they'll come for you too. Ethan stood still, his mind struggling to keep up with her words. His heart pounded in his chest. The stories of ruthless alien invaders had always painted them as heartless. But Circa was different. She wasn't begging for her life out of fear. She was asking for help to stop something far worse than anything he could imagine. Before he could respond, a distant sound reached his ears, the unmistakable hum of engines. Ethan's eyes widened. The faint but growing noise seemed to be coming from the horizon. It was too quiet to be a natural occurrence. Circa looked at him, her face ashen. "They found us," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of the engines. "We don't have much time." Ethan's gaze darted around, looking for an escape route. Panic gripped his chest. No backup, no plan. His mind raced, but there was nothing to do but react. "Get up," he ordered, grabbing Circa by the arm and pulling her to her feet. "We need to move now." Circa winced, but quickly regained her stance. She was strong, despite her injuries. "You'll regret this," she muttered. But there was a hint of something else, something like gratitude. Even if she didn't admit it, the two of them ran, Ethan's military training kicking. He led them toward a nearby cave he had spotted earlier, a potential hiding place. Circa followed, her alien form moving with surprising agility, despite the blood dripping from her side, as they reached the entrance. Ow! The sounds of the engines grew louder. Ethan could feel the sweat running down his face as he pulled her inside just moments before a large shadow passed overhead. The aliens were close. Very close. They were not alone anymore. And if Ethan didn't make the right decision now, everything he had ever known, everything he thought was true, could be destroyed. The cave grew darker as they moved deeper into its mouth. Ethan felt a coldness creeping up his spine, but it wasn't just the chill of the cave. It was the overwhelming sense that the world as he knew it was about to change forever. The cave was still, save for the echo of their breath. Ethan crouched by the edge, peering out into the darkness beyond. The faint hum of the alien engines faded as the hunters passed overhead. He didn't trust the silence. It was too still, too perfect, like the calm before the storm. But for now, they were safe. Circa sat a few feet away, her back against the cold stone, her breathing shallow. The wound in her side was deeper than she had let on, blood staining her armor. Ethan wanted to help her, but he didn't know how. His training had never covered how to patch up an alien warrior. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Ethan asked, his voice rough in the silence. "Why didn't you explain all this? Back there?" He motioned vaguely to the entrance of the cave, where they had just barely escaped the alien hunters. Circa didn't answer immediately. She looked down at the bloodied armor on her chest, her expression distant. "I couldn't. Not until you." "Understood. Not until I knew I could trust you." The words hung heavy in the air. Trust. It was a word that had never meant much to Ethan before. In his world, trust was earned through action. And action spoke louder than words. He had fought battles where trust meant the difference between life and death, but it had always been one-sided. One side trusting their weapon, the other trusting their strategy. But here with Circa, things were different. He wasn't sure if he was ready to trust her yet. "Trust me, Ethan," Circa said softly, almost as though reading his thoughts. "I am the same as you. I fight for survival. But my people... They don't know what they're doing. They've been blinded by power, and they're ready to destroy everything that stands in their way." Ethan shook his head, frustration bubbling up. "You want me to believe that? That your people, your whole species, has gone rogue? After everything I've been taught? You've been trained to kill humans, to invade our worlds. Why would I trust you?" Circa's eyes darkened, as if the weight of her own words burdened her too. She looked away, staring into the shadows of the cave. "Because I've seen what's coming, and I can't stand by while my people ruin everything. The invasion... It's not what they promised. It's not an honor. It's a slaughter." Ethan's mind reeled. He had always been taught that aliens were enemies, invaders. The idea that one of them, one who had killed without hesitation, without remorse, could change their ways, felt... impossible. But there was something in Circa's voice that made him stop. Something raw, something human, hidden beneath her cold exterior. His gaze softened as he knelt down beside her, finally allowing himself to look at her as more than just an enemy. So, what now? How do we stop them? For the first time since their encounter, Circa's eyes softened. We have to take the fight to them. But it's not just about fighting. It's about stopping the madness before it spreads. She hesitated, her fingers curling into a fist. There are others like Metafectors, rebels. They want peace. But we need your help to make it happen. Ethan paused, weighing her words. He had always thought of war in terms of strategy and survival. But this felt different. Could he really help an alien to stop an invasion? Could he risk everything for someone who had once been an enemy? The walls of the cave felt like they were closing in. The weight of his decision pressed down on him like a stone, heavy and suffocating. His mind was spinning. The thought of returning home, of reporting to his commanders, of telling them the truth about Circuit was unimaginable. But could he live with himself if he didn't at least try? How do I know you're not just using me? Ethan asked, his voice barely a whisper. How do I know this isn't some kind of trick? Circa's gaze turned hard. I would rather die than trick you. I've already lost everything, my people. ... my honor. All I have left is the truth. I'm offering it to you. Take it or walk away. But if you walk away, it's not just my life at stake. It's yours too. The invasion is coming, Ethan, and you're not going to be able to stop it alone. The urgency in her words cut through him like a blade. For the first time, Ethan realized that this wasn't about survival. It wasn't about his mission, or even about the humans he had sworn to protect. This was about stopping a force far bigger than anything he could have imagined, a force that would destroy everything if left unchecked. His grip on his gun loosened. Maybe he hadn't fully understood the scale of what was happening. Maybe he hadn't seen the whole picture. But now, staring at Circa, a strange realization settled over him. She wasn't the enemy. The enemy was something much bigger. And if he didn't act now, it wouldn't just be alien species that would fall. It would be everything he had ever known. All right, Ethan said, standing up and offering her a hand. I'll help you, but we do this my way. Circa stared at his hand for a moment, then, without hesitation, she took it. The warmth of her grip was steady, unwavering. In that moment, they weren't enemies anymore. They were allies in a fight. For survival, and together, they would have to face the truth about the war and the monsters waiting on the other side. The cave was silent again, but this time the stillness felt ominous, like the calm before a violent storm. Ethan and Circa had spent hours inside, planning their next move. Despite their fragile alliance, trust still hung between them like an invisible thread, thin and delicate. It was clear they were working toward the same goal, but the uncertainty gnawed at Ethan. He was supposed to be back on Earth by now, reporting his findings. But instead, he found himself caught between two worlds, one he knew, and one that was alien, literally and figuratively. The stakes were higher than anything he'd ever imagined. Circa was pacing by the cave entrance, her eyes scanning the horizon. Her wound was slowing her down, but there was a fire in her that couldn't be ignored. She was driven, consumed with the need to stop the invasion. Ethan, on the other hand, couldn't shake the nagging voice in his head that told him this was all a trap. Ethan, Circa's voice cut through the tension, sharp and serious. She turned to face him, her blue eyes dark with an emotion he couldn't quite place. There's something you need to understand. We don't have time to waste. The invasion fleet is ready. If we don't act now, Earth will be wiped out just like the others. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, his gaze dropping to the floor. He was beginning to feel the weight of her words more than he'd care to admit. The truth was, he was afraid of losing everything. Afraid of trusting her, but more afraid of not stopping the war. Tell me again, he said, trying to force the doubt out of his voice. Why should I trust you? Circa's lips tightened into a grim line. Because if you don't, the entire galaxy will burn. You've seen the destruction they're capable of. They're not just trying to conquer Earth. They're trying to erase it along with every other world they deem a threat. Ethan's fists clenched at his sides. He didn't want to believe her, but the truth was clear. There was no turning back now. If what she said was true, if her people were really capable of such devastation, then every second spent hesitating was another second Earth didn't have. But something else was troubling him, something that felt off in the pit of his stomach. He couldn't ignore the feeling that something wasn't right. Circa's past had a piece of the puzzle he hadn't yet uncovered, before he could voice his concerns. A sound shattered the air. A low hum, rhythmic and distant, but unmistakable. It was the unmistakable whine of ship engines. Large ones. They were close. Circa's face hardened. They're here. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. His instincts screamed to run, but Circa didn't flinch. She was calm, almost eerily so. What do we do now? He asked, trying to mask his rising panic. Sawyer turned to him, her gaze locked on his, with fierce determination. We fight, she said simply, but as she said those words, a sudden realization hit him like a punch to the gut. A sudden betrayal. Ethan's stomach twisted as the sound of footsteps echoed from the shadows, growing louder by the second. His hand instinctively went to his gun, but Circa's voice stopped him. No, don't, she warned, her tone urgent but calm. Ethan's pulse quickened as he turned to face her. What do you mean, don't? Her face was stone cold, but her eyes were full of something, regret. For the first time since they had met, there was a flicker of doubt in her expression. Ethan's mind raced, trying to process the shift in her demeanor. Why was she stopping him? Then the truth hit him like a jolt of electricity. SYRCA wasn't here to stop the invasion. She had a far deeper connection to the enemy than she had ever let on. Her allegiance had never truly been with humanity. She had betrayed him, just as the realization hit him. The cave entrance was filled with a blinding light. The shadows that had been lingering now stepped into the light, revealing an entire squadron. Of alien soldiers? They weren't the kind of soldiers Ethan had expected. These were not the rogue warriors, the defectors. No, these were the elite, and in the center of them stood someone Ethan recognized immediately. The alien leader, the one Circa had warned him about, stood tall, his armor gleaming. Was a towering figure, his skin a dark shade of blue, with jagged, intimidating markings running along his arms. His eyes burned with a cold, unrelenting fire. Beside him, smiling smugly, was Circa. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. This was no accident. Circa had led him into a trap. She wasn't a rebel. She had been playing him all along. You, Ethan's voice was low, barely above a whisper. You were with them all along. Circa didn't respond. She simply stepped aside, allowing the alien leader to approach. The leader's grin widened as he locked eyes with Ethan. You should have listened to her, the leader said, his voice dripping with mockery. You were never going to be part of this fight. You were just a pawn in a game much bigger than you. Ethan's heart dropped as the pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. Circa had never been fighting for peace. She was playing both sides, and now he was the one who had been played. Circa's gaze flickered to the ground, avoiding Ethan's eyes. I'm sorry, she muttered, her voice barely audible. But this is the only way. The alien leader stepped forward, drawing his weapon. Ethan's thoughts spun. He had been betrayed not just by an alien, but by someone he had begun to trust. The walls were closing in, and his worst fears were realized. This was only the beginning of something far darker. Ethan's hand gripped his weapon tightly, his body filled with a sense of cold, focused rage. No longer a pawn in Circa's game, he was done being deceived. This fight wasn't about survival anymore. It was about taking back control, and he would make them regret the day they decided to betray him. The air felt heavier than it ever had before. Ethan stood frozen, his mind reeling from the revelation. Circa, the warrior he had reluctantly come to trust, was no ally. She was a part of the very force he had been sent to stop. The alien leader's words echoed in his mind. You were just a pawn in a game much bigger than you. The sting of betrayal cut deeper than any wound he had ever received in battle. He had been so close to believing in something, believing in Herb, but now it was all shattered. Not with us, are you? Ethan's voice cracked, barely above a whisper as he stepped back, eyes darting between Circa and the alien soldiers. His heart beat painfully in his chest, a mixture of anger, disbelief, and betrayal swirling inside him. Sora didn't answer right away. Instead, her gaze fell to the ground, the weight of her actions pressing down on her shoulders. Ethan could see it now. Her eyes no longer held the same fire, the same drive they once had. There was something deeper there. Regret? Shame? He wasn't sure, but it didn't matter now. The alien leader stepped forward, the gleam of his weapon reflecting the cold light of the cave. You didn't think you'd ever win this fight, human? Not once. The moment you stepped onto this planet, you sealed your fate. And your so-called ally here made sure of it. Ethan's hands tightened into fists, the rage inside him threatening to boil over. He cut himself off, taking a deep breath. This wasn't the time for rage. He needed clarity. He needed to think. You think this is all about your mission? About Earth? The alien leader scoffed, his voice dripping with condescension. This is bigger than your petty world. This is about the survival of all species. And people understand that she understands. That. Ethan's gaze shot to Circa. His words were harsh, filled with the bitterness of betrayal. Is this really about saving the galaxy? Or is it just about saving your own skin? Circa flinched at his words. But then, she looked up, meeting his gaze for the first time since the betrayal was revealed. Her expression was unreadable, but her voice was calm, too calm. It was never about saving anyone, she said softly. It was about surviving. Do you really think I had a choice? My people have been at war for centuries, and I was born into it. But you can't understand what it's like to be a soldier raised to fight for the sake of fighting, for the sake of power. When you're taught that, only strength matters, only victory matters. Choices become luxuries. Ethan's chest tightened. He didn't want to hear it. He didn't want to understand. He had trusted her. He had fought beside her. And now, here she was, admitting that all of it had been a lie, a carefully crafted illusion. I didn't want this, she continued, her voice wavering for the first time. I didn't want to be part of their plan, but I had no choice. I was raised to believe that if you want to survive, you obey orders. They made me think I had no other way. I thought, maybe if I got close enough to you, to your world, I could find a way to stop them. Ethan's mind was a whirlwind of emotions. On one hand, he understood the desperation in her voice, the feeling of being trapped, of having no choice. But on the other hand, he couldn't shake the cold reality of what she had done to him, to his world. You used me, Ethan spat. You used me to get closer to Earth. I didn't know how else to stop them, Circa responded, her voice barely a whisper. I didn't know how else to warn you. She paused, as if struggling with the words. Did I? No now. I made the wrong choice. Ethan stood silent for a long moment, feeling the weight of her confession settle into his chest like a stone. He wanted to hate her, to walk away and leave her there to face the consequences of her actions. But deep down, he understood something far more painful, something he hadn't been able to admit until now. They were both victims of a war they never asked for. And now, both of them were caught in its grip, with no way out. The alien leader, watching the exchange, stepped closer, a wicked smile curling on his lips. She's a fool if she thinks you'll ever forgive her. She's led you into this trap, and now you're as much a pawn as she ever was. Ethan's eyes burned with anger. But there was a flicker of something else, something he hadn't expected. Pity. He pitied Circa. She had been used as much as he had. She'd been a soldier, a tool, just like him. And in the end, they were both standing at the mercy of forces far beyond their control. You want to fight? Ethan said, his voice steady now. A calm rage simmering beneath the surface. Then let's fight. The alien leader laughed, raising his weapon. Foolish human, you're outnumbered, outmatched. You're nothing but an ant beneath our feet. But Ethan wasn't afraid anymore. Fear had evaporated, replaced by something far stronger. Betrayed by blood, yes, but not defeated, not yet. Ethan glanced at Circa one last time, his eyes locking. With hers, for the first time, there was no anger. There was no hatred. It was only the cold, grim understanding of what had to be done. He raised his weapon, preparing to fight not for Earth, not for the aliens, but for himself. And in that, the moment, everything changed. The battle wasn't about who would win. It was about who would survive. The cave had transformed. Once a place of relative safety, it now felt like the edge of a precipice, teetering between survival and utter annihilation. Ethan's breath was shallow, the weight of what was about to unfold, pressing on his chest like 1,000 tons. Circa stood beside him, still as a statue, but her presence no longer felt like an ally. It felt like a reminder that everything had changed. The alien leader, known as Vardok, had made his move. His soldiers, a menacing wall of advanced technology and armor, stood at the cave's entrance. Ethan's rifle felt too light in his hands, but it was all he had left. The alliance with Circa, whatever it had been, was over. She was no longer the ally he had trusted. She was a product of the very forces that were now intent on wiping out everything he held dear. "Make your peace, human," Vardok said, his voice like the rumble of a storm cloud ready to break. "Your resistance ends here. You've played your part in this little game, but now the real war begins, and you will not survive it." Ethan could feel his pulse pounding in his ears, but something inside him had shifted. The fear was gone, replaced by something far more dangerous. Clarity. He wasn't going to let Vardok or anyone dictate the outcome of this war. He had already lost everything that mattered. Now, it was time to make sure they didn't win. Circa stepped forward, her once strong form now shadowed by uncertainty. "Ethan, enough," he cut her off. His voice was cold, harder than he had ever sounded before. "You made your choice. And now, you'll live with it." She flinched, but there was no apology in her eyes, only the grim resignation of a soldier who had given up everything for a cause that wasn't her own. Vardok's laughter echoed off the stone walls. "She's already made her peace, human. You should do the same." Ethan didn't flinch. He couldn't afford to. His world had shifted from one of rules, orders, and structure to chaos. Now his enemy wasn't just an alien. It was a system, a war. An unstoppable tide of violence and destruction that was closing in faster than he could comprehend. He turned his back on Circa, his focus now entirely on Vardok.
What?
"You think this ends with me, don't you? You think that because I'm a soldier? I'll just lie down and die." Vardok's smirk faded slightly, replaced by a more calculating expression. "You misunderstand me, human. I've already won." Ethan's grip tightened on his rifle. He had to make the first move. He couldn't afford to wait any longer. Time was running out, and if they didn't act now, the invasion fleet would reach Earth. It would be the end for everything he cared about. Before he could raise his weapon, something unexpected happened. A series of explosions shook the ground beneath them, the cave walls trembling. The air was thick with dust, and for a moment, everything went dark. Then a series of figures emerged from the smoke. They were soldiers, human soldiers, but not the ones he had expected. These were the rebels, the ones Circa had spoken of. Ethan's heart skipped. The timing was perfect, just as Vardok's forces were about to strike. They had arrived. Circa's face tightened in disbelief, her eyes locking with Ethan's. You called them." Ethan didn't answer. He didn't need to. The sight of the human soldiers pouring into the cave, guns drawn, was all the answer Vardok needed. His smug expression faltered, and the air seemed to crackle with the electricity of a battle about to explode. Vardok barked orders.
Practice.
His soldiers reacting instantly, raising their weapons and readying for combat. But it was too late. Had already begun. Ethan moved with a fluidity born of years of training. Darting between rocks and using the chaos to his advantage, the human soldiers fought with an intensity that spoke volumes. These were people who had already lost everything. Just like him, they weren't going to let it all slip away now. Circa, still standing at the edge of the battlefield, hesitated. For a moment, Ethan saw her hand tremble slightly, but there was no time for that now. No time for second guesses. She had made her choice. Ethan had made his. The cave erupted into chaos. Explosions ripped through the air, sending shockwaves. Through the ground, gunfire rang out like a storm, echoing off the walls. Ethan fought with a cold focus, his rifle kicking against his shoulder with each shot. Alien soldiers fell one by one, but it wasn't enough. The odds were still stacked against them. In the midst of the battle, Ethan's eyes caught something that made his blood run cold. Vardock had moved toward Circa, his expression dark, intent on finishing what he had started. "Ethan," Circa screamed, her voice full of desperation. "Get back!" But it was too late. Vardock had grabbed her, pulling her away from the line of fire. His hand clamped around her throat. Ethan's heart hammered in his chest as he watched the alien leader's grip tighten. In that moment, everything froze. All the years of training, all the battles, every conflict that had led him here, it all led to this single, impossible choice. He could save her. He could let go of the betrayal and take one last chance to right the wrongs, or he could let her die a casualty of the war. She had helped start. His mind was racing. But there was no time for hesitation. Ethan made his choice. The dust settled, but the echoes of battle still rang in Ethan's ears. The cave was a mess of debris, smoke, and bodies. Alien and human alike lay scattered on the cold stone ground, their once pristine armor now broken and scorched. The chaos had subsided, but the air felt thick with something heavier than smoke. The weight of loss. Ethan stood alone in the middle of the carnage, his chest heaving, his mind spinning. His rifle hung loosely in his hand, its barrel smoking. From the last shot, the alien leader Vardock was dead. His body lay crumpled in the corner of the cave, an eerie stillness surrounding him. Circa had been freed barely. Her wounds were deep, but she was alive. It's for now, but the battle wasn't over. Ethan glanced over at her. She was slumped against the cave wall, blood dripping from her side, her breath shallow. Despite everything that had happened, despite the betrayal, he couldn't leave her like that. He couldn't just walk away. It wasn't about forgiveness anymore. It was about survival, their survival. Circa's eyes flickered as she tried to lift her head, her voice weak. You did it, human. You stopped them." Ethan's gaze hardened. "It's not over yet, not by a long shot." Circa gave a weak smile, though it barely reached her eyes. "You're right," she coughed, blood staining her lips. "But at least we have time now. Time to finish what we started." Ethan crouched beside her, checking her wound with quick, practiced movements. He could feel the coldness of her skin, the faint pulse beneath her flesh. She was slipping away fast, and there was no guarantee that they had the resources to save her. But he wouldn't give up as he worked to stabilize her. I wandered back to everything that had happened, how he had trusted her, how she had deceived him, and how, in the end, they had both been pawns in a game too big to understand. But now, the war was over, or at least the first part of it. The fleet that had been poised to destroy Earth was gone, scattered across the galaxy in the wake of their final stand. But the destruction left behind was like a scar on the universe. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about rebuilding. About making sure that everything they had fought for wasn't lost in the chaos of war. And the thought of returning home, of reporting back to Earth, seemed impossible now. What would he even say? The mission had changed too much. Earth was no longer just a planet to defend. It was part of something much bigger, something interconnected. With the fate of all worlds, Ethan took a deep breath, his resolve hardening. He wasn't going back. Not now, not ever. "Circa," he said, his voice low but steady. "We're not done yet." Her eyes fluttered, fighting to stay open. What? What do you mean?" Ethan looked around the cave, his gaze shifting over the dead. The destruction, the ruins of everything they had once known. The silence of the aftermath was deafening. "We're going to make sure this never happens again. We're going to rebuild, not just Earth, but everything. The galaxy's been at war for too long. We're going to fix it together." Circa's lips parted in surprise, her breath catching. "But you can't possibly." "I can," Ethan interrupted, his voice unwavering. "I won't let all of this be in vain. I have to find the others, those who are still alive, those who want to fight for something better. We'll stop the wars, Not with violence, but with something else. With unity. With peace. The idea felt strange to him, almost foreign. Peace. A soldier who had lived his life by the gun suddenly talking about peace. It sounded impossible. But somewhere deep inside, he knew it was the only way forward. If they didn't start rebuilding, all the sacrifices would be meaningless. He had seen too much death, too much destruction, to let it continue. Circa's eyes softened as she looked. At him, a hint of something unfamiliar in her expression. Hope. You think we can do it? You think we can change everything? Ethan didn't answer immediately. He just looked at the cave entrance, where the sunlight filtered through the cracks, casting a golden hue across the battlefield. The outside world was waiting. A new world. A world that wasn't bound by the chains of war. I don't know, he finally said, his voice steady with resolve. But if we don't try, then nothing changes. Circa nodded weakly, her hand brushing his as he continued to work on her wounds. She had been a soldier, like him. She had been raised to believe in violence, in victory through power. Together, they could build something different, something more than just a war to survive. They could build a future. Ethan stood, pulling Circa carefully into his arms. It was going to be a long journey of healing, of loss, and of hope. But they had time now. They had the chance to make things right. As they stepped out into the light of the new day, Ethan knew the war had ended. Their real fight, the fight for peace, was just beginning.